Firstly, a very good morning to all the students on this internship program and warm greetings to my colleagues from the USI. At the outset, I would like to thank the director USI for inviting me to give this talk on India's space program, a subject which is gaining increasing importance with every passing year, both from a national economic as well as security perspective. India has made commendable progress in the space sector over the last few decades, and my talk aims to give you all an overview of India's profile and achievements in this sector. This being an internship program for bright young minds about to launch yourselves in your respective careers, I must comment that space continues to capture the imagination of our younger generation, since it presents an inexhaustible potential for exploration, diverse uses that modern society demands, and discovery. Space technology can be leveraged for enhancing human welfare, disaster management and conflict prevention, and also quench man's thirst for exploration and offer a means for survival for the human race, which is becoming more and more, probably a requirement in the coming decades as Earth becomes less habitable. Importantly, the national security implications of space can no longer be ignored. Space has already been designated as a warfighting domain, together with the traditional domains of land, sea, and air, with cyber being the newest item on the list. And the major world powers are moving ahead vigorously towards developing military space as well as counter space capabilities. And with China, a daunting adversary sitting next door, India cannot afford to drag its feet while trying to keep pace with these significant developments, which have grave implications for our national security. Another key facet which needs to be taken note of is the recent commercialization of the space sector. The term new space refers to initiatives being taken in this direction. While earlier the state used to have monopoly over the sector, private actors are now playing an increasingly important role. A notable example being SpaceX, which most of you must have heard. The world today is seeing the emergence of new space as a revolution in the space industry, with private industries leading the way in applying the expertise which has been acquired by national space agencies as commercial value propositions. Currently, India contributes barely 2% of approximately a $360 billion global space economy. Policy formulation for space commerce, especially with regard to the private sector's role in this all-important area, is extremely relevant for the growing importance for the growth of India's space endeavors. So in this introductory talk, I shall briefly acquaint you with the various types of, to begin with, various types of satellite orbits, which I feel a brief introduction is required for you to properly get the right perspective of in the lecture. And then the most common space applications and outline India's achievements in these areas. A brief look will then be taken on India's satellite launch vehicles, extraterrestrial exploration, and future projects. I'll then introduce you to the organizations which have so far steered India's space endeavors, including some very new establishments established over the last couple of years, which will spur these endeavors to newer heights. And I shall devote a significant slice of my time with you in discussing the national security implications of this important warfighting domain. Finally, we shall have a look at the important aspect of commercialization of the space sector. Now, it's a big, huge range of topics. I hope I am not biting more than I can chew. So let's get on to it straight away. Coming to the types of orbits. The main features of the most commonly used orbits, which are the geostationary orbit, the low Earth orbit, the medium Earth orbit, the polar orbit with sun synchronous orbit as a special case. Now, before I go into these, it will be very brief. Let me also make a statement here that orbits satellites fly around the Earth in an orbit at tremendous speeds for years together, and no energy is required. So why is this? I don't know how much you know about this. Let's say you throw up a ball. When you throw it up, energy is required, but when it comes down, that means when it falls, free fall, there's no energy required. So let me make another statement here that satellites don't require energy because they are continuously falling around the Earth. Now we'll figure this statement out if you so wish during the interaction phase. So let me get on to the orbits per se, starting with the geostationary orbit. Satellites in GEO circle Earth above the equator, underline above the equator, from west to east following Earth's rotation, taking 23 hours, 56 minutes and 4 seconds, traveling at exactly the same rate as Earth. Now, why is 4 minutes less than 24 hours? I thought the Earth rotates, takes 24 hours to rotate. Well, this also we can answer during the interaction session. And this makes satellites in GEO appear to be stationary to a ground observer. The speed of the GEO satellite is about 3 kilometers per second at an altitude of roughly 36,000 kilometers. GEO is used by telecommunication satellites so that an antenna on Earth can be fixed to always stay pointed towards the satellite without moving because it is stationary with respect to the ground observer. Satellites in GEO cover a large range of Earth, so as few as 3 equally spaced satellites, GEO satellites, can provide near global communication coverage. Satellites in GEO are also used by weather monitoring satellites to observe weather trends over specific areas. Next, this slide I will use to answer the question of why it is 4 minutes less if somebody asks the question. Low Earth orbit. Satellites low Earth orbit are at an altitude ranging from 160 to 1000 kilometers. By comparison, commercial airplanes fly not higher than 15 kilometers, so that the lowest low Earth orbit is more than 10 times higher than the highest commercial plane. Satellites in this orbit travel at a speed of around 8 kilometers per second, taking approximately 90 minutes to circle the Earth, which means it takes about 16 rotations of the Earth in a day. 8 kilometers per second compared to 3 kilometers in geostationary orbit, that is the speed of the LEO. I mean, approximately, there are various heights. Unlike GEO, that must always orbit around the Earth's equator, the planes of LEO can be tilted, giving more available routes, which is one of the reasons why LEOs are commonly used. LEO's lower altitude make it useful for satellites to achieve a higher image resolution, obviously because of the lower altitude, and also for communication since lesser power is required, lesser distance. However, LEO satellites used for communications require complex tracking because these are moving very fast. In order to provide constant coverage, communication satellites in LEO work as part of a large constellation. Next, medium Earth orbit, MEO. These are usually at altitude between 10,000 and 20,000 kilometers, although anything between LEO, which is 1,000 kilometers, and GEO, which is 36,000 kilometers, anything in between would be classified as MEO, but normally they are between 10,000 and 20,000 kilometers because of various Van Allen belts, etc., which interfere with the movements. And they take 2 to 8 hours to orbit the Earth, requiring between 8 and 20 units to complete the coverage of the Earth. As an example, a constellation of 24 MEO satellites could have 4 covering any given spot on the Earth at any time of the day. So if there are multiple satellites together being seen from the ground, it takes care of communication outages because of inclement weather if some satellites are masked, and also achieve greater accuracy in position tracking, as for example in your GPS you may have noticed. Satellites in MEO orbits are properly used for navigation purposes or for communications with lower power requirement, higher throughput and lower latency. Now the meaning of throughputs, latencies we can discuss during interaction. All popular navigation constellations, namely the US GPS, Russia's GLONASS, Europe's Galileo and China's Beidou, mostly use MEO orbits. Notably, however, the Indian National Navigation System, the NAVIC, which we'll be talking a little more, This system is based on GEO and not MEO satellites. Next, coming to polar orbit. Now, this is an interesting orbit with a special case, the sun synchronous orbit. And these are last of the orbit, so if it's getting too much. Satellites in polar orbits usually travel past the Earth from north to south, passing roughly over Earth's poles with altitudes ranging between 200 and 1000 kilometers, which is something like LEO. North-south orbits with an inclination of to 30 degrees are still classified as polar orbits. Polar orbits provide coverage of the full globe because of the Earth's rotation. Now, why is this? The satellite itself is going north to south and the Earth is rotating from east to west, and because of these two movements, which are quite independent of each other, the satellite gets the full coverage of the globe in a 24-hour or whatever period. The sun synchronous orbit is a particular kind of polar orbit. Being synchronous with the sun means the satellites in these orbits are always in the same fixed position relative to the sun. The satellite always, that means the satellite always visits the same spot at the same local time, allowing imaging under same lighting and angular conditions over a period of time. This helps to predict weather or storms, monitoring emergencies like forest fires or flooding, or to accumulate data on long-term problems like deforestation or rising sea levels. So much about orbits. Now let's come on to this is, I'll use this slide. I'll not go over it. I'll use it if somebody wants to understand a little more on sun synchronicity of satellites, sun synchronous orbits. Now coming into the satellite applications. Space applications can broadly be grouped into the following categories: Earth observation, communications, navigation. These are the three main. Scientific and exploration, and experimental. A little about all these. Firstly, Earth observation, also called remote sensing, which corresponds to the IRS and EOS, Earth observation satellite series of ISRO. Earth observation satellites are equipped with remote sensing technology and are thus also known as remote sensing satellites. These are used to study vegetative conditions, ground and sea surface temperatures, ground elevation, cloud conditions, water distribution, oceans, etc., urban and rural development, disaster management, etc. Various types of sensors. Now, essentially, there are two types of sensors: optical and microwave. Optical sensors observe the reflection of sunlight, including invisible, ultraviolet, and infrared, as well as the Earth's radiation, the heat coming out of the Earth. On the other hand, microwave sensing. Now, how is it different from optical? Microwaves have a much longer wavelength compared to visible light, also infrared and ultraviolet. And so microwaves can penetrate through cloud cover, haze, dust, and all but the heaviest rainfall, as the longer wavelengths are not susceptible to atmospheric scattering. Now, microwave sensors can be active or passive, the only difference being that active microwave sensors, the satellite sends out microwave and gets reflected waves, whereas in passive microwave sensors, now every body emits certain amount of microwave energy, though it is in very small amounts, and these are detected by passive microwave sensors. So these are the types of sensors which are there in the remote sensing satellites. Starting with the IRS-1A in 1988, ISRO has launched many remote sensing satellites, making India's remote sensing constellation the largest in operation today globally, which provide data in diversified spatial, spectral, and temporal resolutions. I suppose these three terms should be clear. As per the data which is available on the site, as on today, in service, while about more than 42 odd remote sensing satellites have been launched ever since its beginning, there are 13 SSO, remote sensing satellites, and 4 remote sensing satellites in GEO, which are in operations today. That means 17 of them. All IRS satellites are placed in polar sun synchronous orbit, except something which is now which is now coming up, geo imaging satellites, GISATs. There are 2 of them which are planned, but none of them have been launched so far. The initial versions of these satellites were named as IRS-1, ABCD, etc., while the later versions were divided into subclasses based on their function. For example, OceanSat, Cartosat, HISIS. Okay, let me just, no, okay. HISIS stands for hyperspectral imaging. It's a special type of imaging. EMISAT, which is a special military intelligence satellite. ResourceSat for monitoring the resources of the Earth. And the nomenclature was again changed back to Earth observation satellites, the general nomenclature, Earth observation satellites. As late as 2020, it has been changed. Coming to the next category, communication satellites, which corresponds to the INSAT and GSAT series of ISRO. Satellite communications have become ubiquitous globally for such diverse applications as television, direct-to-home broadcasting, digital satellite news gathering, DSNG, I wonder whether you heard this term, and VSAT, very small aperture terminals for mobile satellite communications. The technology has matured substantially over the past 3 decades. A communication satellite basically relays, it's a transponder, it's a relay where a transponder on the satellite receives radio communication, telecommunication from a ground transmitter and relays it back to a ground receiver. So that's essentially what a communication satellite does. Out of approximately 3,000 satellites in operation today, nearly half are communication satellites. Most communication satellites are in geostationary orbit, and therefore tracking is a trivial function. Why? Because it's stationary, and so tracking is trivial. As stated earlier, only 3 satellites in GEO are needed to provide global communication coverage. ISRO's Indian National Satellite or INSAT system is one of the largest domestic communication satellite systems in the Asia Pacific region, with a large number of operational communication satellites placed in GEO. Now the numbers here are a little, there's an anomaly in the numbers. What is there in the ISRO site? 9 of the INSAT series, 15 of the GSAT series, and 1, it has been later changed to CMS. CMS is communication satellite. So these are the number of satellites which are in service today, although overall about 44 communication satellites have been launched so far. Established in 1983 with the commissioning of INSAT 1B, this system initiated a major revolution in India's communication center and sustained the same subsequently. The INSAT system is a joint venture of the Department of Space, Department of Telecommunications, the Indian Met Department, All India Radio, and Doordarshan. As stated earlier, the nomenclature of satellite series was shifted to GSAT from INSAT in 2001. Before that it was called INSAT, now after that it's GSAT, which was further changed to CMS from 2020 onwards. These satellites have been in use by the Indian Armed Forces as well. And GSAT 9, which is a special satellite, it's referred to as a SARC satellite, is an example of providing communication services for India's smaller neighbors. Coming to the third category, the navigation applications, in which there are 2 systems, Gagan and Navik. Now, what are these 2? Gagan essentially is not really an Indian navigation system per se. It augments the GPS of the US. Now, how does it do so? Gagan, which has been jointly developed by ISRO and the Airport Authority of India, to provide accurate navigation services over the Indian flight information region for the aviation sector. GPS alone does not meet the International Civil Aviation Organization navigation requirements for accuracy, integrity, and availability. So Gagan augments the GPS for providing better position accuracy. It consists of a set of ground reference stations positioned across various locations in India, which gather the GPS satellite data. The reference station help in generating GPS correction messages, which are rebroadcast via 3 of our own geostationary satellite, the GSAT 8, 10, and 15. Gagan has been functional since 2015. Now coming to Navik. Now this is the real Indian navigation system. It is an Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, IRNSS, and it has also been given the operational name Navik, which stands for Navigation with Indian Constellation. It is designed to provide position information to users in India as well as the region extending up to 1500 kilometers from its borders. And it has 2 types of services, namely standard positioning service for normal users and a restricted service. The restrict service is encrypted and provide a higher accuracy of 1 to 5 meters. It is a regional satellite navigation system which has been developed by ISRO and which is under total control of the Indian government, obviously. The requirement of such a navigation system is obviously due to the fact that access to global navigation systems like GPS is not guaranteed in hostile situations. The constellation consists of 7 active satellites. A total of 9 were launched. One of them is partial function, one failed during launch itself. 3 of these are located in GEO and 4 in inclined GSO. Now, GSO stands for geosynchronous as against geostationary. A geosynchronous orbit also has a period of 24 hours, but it is not directly above the equator, it is inclined, and so it is not really fully stationary. The system is intended to provide an absolute position accuracy of better than 10 meters throughout the Indian landmass and better than 20 meters in the balance area of operation. In comparison, the GPS has a position accuracy of 20 to 30 meters. So over the Indian landmass and in the area around, the NAVIC is more accurate than the GPS. In 2020, Qualcomm has launched 4 new 4G chipsets and one 5G chipset with support for NAVIC. The implication being that Qualcomm chipsets are used in your mobile phones, including Vivo and all these latest ones, Nokia, Samsung, etc. And so you will have these giving support to the NAVIC navigation system as well. In addition, as I mentioned, there are scientific satellites, and India's space program encompasses research in areas like astronomy, astrophysics, planetary and earth sciences, atmospheric sciences, theoretical physics, and balloons, sounding rockets, place platforms, and ground-based facilities. All these support these research activities. Then you have experimental satellites. So ISRO has launched many small satellites for experimental purposes. India's first satellite, Aryabhat, launched by a Soviet rocket in 1975, was an experimental satellite carrying X-ray astronomy, solar physics related payloads. Apple was ISRO's first indigenous experimental communication satellite. And the INS-1C, INS stands for ISRO Nano Satellite, which has been launched in January 2018, is the most recent experimental satellite, which is designed to carry out multispectral imaging, a special type of imaging, which will be actually used in subsequent operational satellites. With that, we come to the end of the satellite applications and ISRO series in these applications. So let's look at India satellite launch vehicles, a very important component of the space initiative. Today, India has 2 operational launches or launch vehicles as they are called. The Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, the PSLV, and the Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle, which is the GSLV. The names are very suggestive. However, the first launch vehicle which successfully put a satellite into orbit was an earlier version called the SLV, simply Satellite Launch Vehicle. The Vikram Sarabhai Space Center is responsible for design and development of launch vehicles. And there are 2 more ISRO establishments, the Liquid Propulsion Systems Center and the ISRO Propulsion Complex, which develop the liquid and cryogenic stages of these launch vehicles. The cryogenic engine, as we shall see, is a very big deal. The Satish Dhawan Space Center is responsible for integration of launches, and of course, it also launches. It has got 2 operational launch pads from where all GSLV and PSLV flights take place. This is the only spaceport of India. An overview of the launch vehicles, a little more on these, is I'm just going to give you. Now, I've placed all these launch vehicles for comparison on one slide. The Satellite Launch Vehicle SLV, that is also known as SLV-3, was the first space rocket to be developed by India. The initial launch in 1979 was a failure, but then there was a successful launch in 1980. Carrying the Rohini RS-1, a 35 kg satellite, making way for India into the club of countries with orbital launch capabilities. Ultimately, it had 4 launches, out of which 2 were successes, and the last launch was in 1987. Again, about 41 kg. So, a very small payload. That was what was the first launch vehicle. There was also an augmented satellite launch vehicle. However, this was being developed in the 80s to place satellites into geostationary orbit. However, due to repeated failures and lack of fund, this project was dropped in favor of the PSLV project, which was going on in parallel. So now let's look at the PSLV. PSLV was the first medium lift launch vehicle from India, which enabled it to launch all its remote sensing satellites into LEO. It can take up to 1.75 ton payload, let's say roughly 2-ton payload, into a sun synchronous orbit. His first successful launch was in 1994, but due to its unmatched reliability, PSLV has also been used to launch various satellites into GEO and GSO, satellites from the Navik constellation. Despite two partial failures, PSLV has become the primary workhorse for ISRO with more than 50 successful launches so far, placing hundreds of Indian and foreign satellites into orbit. Besides, the vehicle has successfully launched two spacecraft, the Chandrayaan-1 in 2008, including the Mars Orbiter spacecraft in 2013. So, PSLV has been a big success. Coming to the GSLV. GSLV was envisioned in the 1990s to transfer significant payloads to GEO. So, while PSLV was for LEO, 2-ton payloads into LEO, the GSLV was meant for the geostationary orbits. ISRO initially faced problems in the development of GSLV as US had blocked India from obtaining cryogenic technology from Russia. Cryogenic engines are a must for such, for going up to the geostationary orbits, 36,000 kilometers. This encouraged India to develop its own cryogenic engines. GSLV Mark II, which is shown here, I hope you can see my cursor also, is shown here. Now it is simply referred to as GSLV, has an indigenously developed cryogenic upper stage, which is called the CE 7.5, which can carry 2-ton payloads to GEO and 5-ton payloads to LEO. GSLV's primary payloads are the INSAT communication satellites. With its first launch in 2001, GSLV has achieved more than 10 successful launches so far. I think 11 or 12 so far. Coming to the most powerful launch vehicle we have today is the GSLV Mark III. Mark III is the heaviest in operational service with ISRO. You can see it on the rightmost here. Equipped with a more powerful cryogenic engine, which is the CE20 than GSLV, Mark III is designed to carry 4-ton payloads as against 2-ton by the Mark II. 4-ton payloads into GEO or 10-ton payloads to LEO, which is about twice the capability of GSLV Mark II. It has had 3 successful launches so far: GSAT 19, GSAT 29 and Chandrayaan 2. Actually, there was a 4th also, which was carrying an experimental payload called the CARE program for the human spaceflight vision, the Gaganyaan mission, which is to take place in the near future. It is also, and this Gaganyaan mission is now delayed to 2023. So 3 successful launches, 1 experimental, and it will also be used for Gaganyaan and of course subsequent launches. So much about India's launch vehicles. Coming to extraterrestrial exploration. There are 3 missions for extraterrestrial exploration which have been undertaken by India so far: Chandrayaan 1 and 2 and the Mars Orbiter mission. Chandrayaan 1. This was India's first mission to the moon. It included a lunar orbiter and an impactor called the Moon Impact Probe. ISRO launched the spacecraft using a PSLV on 22nd October 2008, which entered into a lunar orbit about 2 weeks later. It carried 11 high-resolution remote sensing equipment for visible, near-infrared and X-ray frequencies, 5 of which were Indian and 6 more from NASA, the European Space Agency and other American and European institutes. While planned for 2 years, the mission was operational for a little over 10 months. During this period, it surveyed the lunar surface to produce a complete map of its chemical characteristics and 3-dimensional topography, focusing on the polar regions, which were expected to have ice deposits. So, Chandrayaan 1 became the first lunar mission to discover existence of water on the moon. Coming to Chandrayaan 2, which I'm sure some of you may have observed the launch, etc. Chandrayaan 2, India's second moon mission, was launched using GSLV Mark 3 now on 22nd July 2019 and consisted of a lunar orbiter, the Vikram lander and the Pragyan lunar rover, all of which were developed in India. It was the first moon mission meant to explore the South Pole region globally. The main objective of Chandrayaan 2 mission was to demonstrate ISRO's ability to soft land on the lunar surface and operate a robotic rover on its surface, in addition to some scientific aims as well. The Vikram lander carrying the Pragyan rover was scheduled to land on the near side of the moon. However, the lander deviated from its intended trajectory at the very last moment, starting from an altitude of about 2 kilometers, and telemetry was lost seconds before touchdown. I happened to be, live seeing this, and you could see the tension on everybody's face when it deviated, and then Prime Minister was also there, etc. So it was quite an experience. The lunar orbiter was efficiently positioned in an optimal lunar orbit, extending its expected service time from 1 year to 7 years. There will be another attempt for soft landing on the moon, as you must be knowing, but without an orbiter. This was earlier scheduled in 2021, but has now been postponed to 2022 due to the COVID pandemic. Coming to Mangalyaan, Mars exploration. The Mars Orbiter Mission MOM, also known as Mangalyaan, was launched into Earth orbit on 5th November 2013 by ISRO using a PSLV, as I stated earlier. The MOM probe spent about a month in Earth's orbit, where it made a series of seven apogee-raising orbital maneuvers, higher and higher orbits, before being injected towards Mars on 30th November, that is 25 days later. After a 298-day transit to Mars, roughly 10 months, it was put into Mars orbit on 24th September 2014. Carried a payload of about 15 kgs comprising of 5 scientific instruments for atmospheric and surface imaging studies. Mangalyaan was India's first interplanetary mission, and it made India the 4th space agency to achieve Mars orbit after Roscosmos of Russia, NASA, and the European Space Agency. India also became the first country to enter Mars orbit on its first attempt, and the mission was completed at a record low cost of 450 crore rupees. On 24th September 2020, MOM completed 6 years in orbit around Mars and is still operational. Future projects. In the coming years, in addition to a number of communication and Earth observation satellites, ISRO plans to send humans into space, that is the Gaganyaan in 2023, and later establish a space station to facilitate a few weeks long stay of astronauts. ISRO aims to develop and operationalize more powerful and less pollutive rocket engines. We'll talk about some of these. Deploy more telescopes in space and develop satellite navigation systems with global coverage. As of now, NAVIC is only regional coverage. Longer term plans may include manned missions to the moon and other planets as well. So let's get an insight to some of the near-term projects. Firstly, launch vehicles and engines. Notable development projects undertaken by ISRO include the semi-cryogenic engine. The current one is cryogenic, reusable launchers, and small satellite launch vehicles, which is the latest craze. Semi-cryogenic engine, the engine is called SCE200, will be less pollutive and more powerful than the current cryogenic engine CE20. When mated with GSLV Mark 3, the same GSLV, the engine will boost its payload capacity from the existing 4 ton to possibly 6 ton. So PSLV 2 ton, GSLV Mark 3 4 ton, and with this semi-cryogenic will probably go up to 6 ton. Methalux engine is another thing which is under development. Methalux stands for methane plus liquid oxygen. They are being developed to ensure reusability of engines. Methane is less pollutive, leaves no residue, and hence the engine can be reused. This comes to, now we have reusable, the next is the reusable launchers. There are 2 reusable launcher projects ongoing at the ISRO. One is the Admire test vehicle, conceived as a vertical takeoff, vertical landing system, and another is what is called as the Reusable Launch Vehicle Technology Demonstrator, or the RLVTD. The latter will also act This is RLV-TD similar to the American Space Shuttle. It will be launched vertically but land like a plane. The latter will also, this RLV-TD will also act as a testbed to evaluate various other technologies such as hypersonic flight, autonomous landing, and powered cruise flight. Next, we have the Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. Small Satellite Launch Vehicle SSLV is a compact small lift launch vehicle primarily aimed at tapping the small satellites market, which is growing exponentially. This launcher can be quickly assembled with low power and hence facilitates far higher launch frequency. The planned SSLV, which ISRO is planning, can place a 500 kg payload into a 500 kilometer LEO, and its maiden flight is expected sometime this year itself. Now, coming to future extraterrestrial probe, Chandrayaan-3 is India's planned second attempt to soft land on the moon after the failure of Chandrayaan-2, now postponed, as I said, to 2022. The mission will only include a lander rover set and will communicate with the orbiter of the existing Chandrayaan-2 orbiter, which is already there. Mangalyaan-2 has been proposed for launch in 2024. The newer spacecraft will be significantly heavier and better equipped than the predecessor. ISRO is also planning an orbiter mission to Venus called Shukrayaan-1 to study its atmosphere. Scheduled for 2025, it will include a payload of 100 kgs comprising instruments from India and some other countries, including France, Russia, and maybe even the US. India's first solar mission, named Aditya L1 to study the solar corona, is due for launch next year. Now, with that, we come to the essentials of India's space program. We shall not delve into